Because I went through really hard times with alcohol and drug addiction. And I want to do whatever I can to help people, avoid those pitfalls. And people who are suffering, what I said before, never give up.
Hi, welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur, international speaker. But most people know me because I spent over 12 years in professional baseball with the Detroit Tigers, Cleveland Indians, and Los Angeles Angels, appearing in 3 World Series as a coach before I was the age of 33. Our Winners Find a Way show is all about how the 1% have found a way to overcome those challenges. When faced with losses and losing, winners find a way. I love the quote from the 4 Disciplines of Execution book written by Chris McChesney and Sean Covey. The quote goes, "Winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win." Won't you join us and discover for yourself how you can win too? Hi, welcome to episode number 1 of the Winners Find a Way show. It's never too late with Scott Spiezio. Scott is a great friend of mine, a 2-time World Series champion as a Major League Baseball player. Both he and his father both won world championships for the St. Louis Cardinals. Scott is just a fabulous guest today, and you are going to love it. You are going to hear about how he'd come back from a step back. We're going to talk about the mental and physical preparation and conditioning and his never give up mentality, how he learned to set goals, and then how faith in his life have kept him in the right direction, and how he battled back from alcohol and drugs by putting on the armor of God. Hi, this is Trent Clark, and welcome to Winners Find a Way. I got my Tigers hat today because I'm sporting it, excited about our guest today, Scott Spiezio. Scott, say hello.
Hey, what's up?
Oh,
hey,
man, I love the backdrop, man. Like,
right?
You're right in the front.
Hey, well, and I got my Illini gear on because they're coming tip off here, 12:15 today.
Yeah.
So I'm rooting them on.
That's right.
But,
a proud alumni right there of the Illini and former player for them. We're going to get into that a little bit. Definitely going to talk about, what I would ask the audience today is this, have you ever faced adversity, felt like the losses were mounting, you need to find a better way? I think you've come to the right place to talk about that. We talk deeply about overcoming challenges with 1% people, like people that have absolutely reached the pinnacle of their profession, of their drive and desire and their goals. And it's exciting to speak with business leaders, sports leaders, athletes, musicians, artists. It's just great to have a different scope of things. But today I welcome, of course, my good friend, Scott Spiezio. But here's a few highlights, Scott, that I just jotted down about you, right? And there are this is like a laundry list of stuff I could do. But when I think about that, Illinois kid, small town Illinois kid, and you become a Big Ten superstar. You hit 48 home runs in just 3 years at the University of Illinois, representing your colors there. And by the way, I'm representing Illini colors today too, even though I was going for Tigers, by the way. But I am representing the Illini because my Spartans lost last night. So the A's you brought up. Then this is an interesting fact about you and I, our paths crossed in a weird way through our lives, right? Because we didn't know each other, but I was there coaching the day in Cleveland when you were brought up with the A's on your first day in the major league. So that was a really cool story that you share, and we're going to talk about that. A free agent contract with the Angels where I was already at. So we became friends coaching Scott, and what a pleasure as a coach to have a guy who comes in and just does his job and works at it. So that was pretty awesome. Big part and a huge part of leading us to the first ever Angels World Championship. Hit probably the most memorable home run of all Angels history in 2002. And you became, for me, Captain Clutch, right? Because you were so good. And John Wooden talks about being your best when your best is needed. And we're going to talk about that because you hit 327 in the playoffs that year, 18 for 57, set the record, tied the record with another guy I coached, Sandy Alomar Jr., with 19 RBIs in a playoff, which is just Unreal. David Ortiz later tied that. So let's get into it, Scott. Let's talk a little bit. Well, first of all, say hello to everybody. And by the way, tell everybody where they can find you. Like, where can we find Scott Spiezio? If I want to reach out to you, are you on Facebook? Where are you on that we can find maybe things about you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, man. And yeah, we go way back, and it's just been such a pleasure for me to get back in touch with you over the last 2 years. And you guys really helped me grow spiritually and as a person. And I really appreciate that. I think what you're doing here is great. Yeah, I love the title of the show because I hate to lose. And
yeah, right. Me too.
And I definitely want to find a way, whatever it takes to win. But as far as I have a Facebook page called Scott Spiezio. It's never too late. I have a Twitter account. It's at Scott_Spiezio. I'm on LinkedIn, and then Instagram at Spiezio S is the places you can get me. Yeah.
Yeah. So no one needs to, hey, like, you can find Scott Spiezio out there, the legendary 2002 and 2006 hero. So that's a cool for all of us who grow up, and we do have those heroes, right? Tell me, Scott, real quick, like, and you talk about that, hey, it's winners find a way. Like, why do you want to come on the show and talk a little bit about your, a lot of people say, hey, man, I went through some hard stuff. I don't really want to talk about it, right? So why would you choose, like, hey, I've got a message, and let's talk about why you'd come on and share that with this show?
Well, I mean, there's two reasons. One is I love baseball and I love sports. But probably the biggest one is because I went through some really hard times with alcohol and drug addiction. And I want to do whatever I can to help people, avoid those pitfalls and people who suffering, what I said before, never give up. There's just, it's incredible. It's very hard to do when you're in the midst of it. And I'm sure we'll probably get into that more, but it's something that a lot of people think that they don't have a chance. And they just kind of, isolate themselves and just kind of give up. And it's, it's starting with just moving one stick, just doing one thing, digging yourself out of that hole.
I love that. Okay. So, I want to kind of dive back into the kid, because what many people don't know about you is that you are the son of a big time major leaguer, right? Yeah. And that you both won a couple world championships, the only father-son to do it, and that you both won a World Series wearing the same number of 26 for the St. Louis Cardinals, right? So first of all, I want you to show the bling. We got a little matching bling, Scotty and I, right? Yeah, like, check it out, the bling. So let's take it back to you being that kid, right? Like, let's talk about the most impactful pivot point you had as a kid when you knew you were destined for, the major leagues. Like, hey, this is what I really want to do. And maybe you got a glimpse that you could do it.
Yeah, well, I always wanted to be a major leaguer. I remember in grade school, my teachers give me those aptitude tests, and they come back fireman or doctor or whatever. And I'd always be so disappointed that they didn't say Major League Baseball player. I'm like, these tests are stupid. They don't work. Yeah. But as far as like a turning point, I had a major league dad as a coach. He stopped playing, and I'm actually in his furniture store right now. He stopped playing when he was 30 years old, and in 1972, the year I was born, and started this furniture store. So I got a great teacher. Not many kids have that opportunity. So I'd always wanted to be, and I'd been around his teammates and stuff like that, his ex-teammates. But probably the biggest point as far as where I knew that I really had some talent was I got brought up as a freshman for a couple games on my high school team. And then my sophomore year, me and my friend both got brought up as sophomores to start every day. And there was this kid from Geneva that came in, and we weren't used to seeing a ton of scouts, and the radar guns were just packed behind the screen. I think you have a similar story to this too. Yeah. But they were just packed behind, and I got up the first time and I was a little nervous, and I ripped a line drive to right field. Next time up, I hit a missile line drive right back, and he ducked and it hit him in the lower back, and he went down hard. And I went to first. The ball ricocheted off him and went all the way to the dugout. That's how hard it hit off him. Yeah. And they ended up bringing an ambulance. Yeah, they brought an ambulance out to the mound and had to get him off the field. And I saw that some of the scouts put away their radar guns right away, but they stick around and watch me play. So from that day on, I knew that I had something.
That's pretty cool. Like, what a story, right? Yeah, how that changed very quickly. So let's talk about, I love this quote from a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it was written by a guy named McChesney and Sean Covey, which happens to be the president of the Stephen Covey, famous story of how to win friends and The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And the Covey, great stuff. The book is fabulous. But the quote says, winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win, right? And man, you and I, we've been there a lot, right? Like, you know what? As a matter of fact, yeah, there was a time here that I remember we were losing once upon a time, and it was pretty evident that we were losing because the scoreboard said 5-0, right?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, like, man, how rough this is going to be, right? To be in the middle of the game. I think it was late in the game. I think it's the 7th inning. Let me just see if I can ever remember being a part of, man. So, like, I kind of feel like it's just awesome that, was there for it, right? Like, just being a part of that moment was so special. When I look back at that, and man, this is the epitome of, winners find a way, right? Like all the KPIs is, hey, the data says that we're losing. Like, it's 5-0. It's the bottom of the 7th. And the starting pitcher, who you did not hit that off, was already given the ball as like, hey, keep that as a memento because this is game 6 and now you're the World Series winning pitcher, right? And a little bit of a mistake for me by their manager. But let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what do you think about that when you think about winners find a way?
Well, I mean, that whole 2002 season with the Angels, that was, we had the rally monkey. We were, if we were down in the 7th and they put that thing up, we knew we were winning. But we just had that mentality. Even on the road, we knew that it didn't matter how much we were down, that this team was going to give everything it had to win. And we knew that if we got the lead, that our bullpen was going to shut it down because they had the same mentality. And, each guy had that same determination, from Erstad to Eckstein to Salmon to Anderson to Troy Gloss, Benji Molina. We just had just an amazing team, top to bottom. Nobody gave us a shot. We were facing the Yankees first game, first series. None of us, not one player had been in the playoffs ever, and on the whole team. And here we go. We're going in the Yankees facing the all-star team. Yeah. Even the guys on the bench would have been starters in any other team. And, we ended up, we lost game 1, but, we just fought back and we won the next 3. And, that same determination just lasted the whole year and carried on. And each one of us as individuals grew from that experience as a team. That game 6 home run there, I was down 0-2, I think, right away. Yeah. And, I kept fouling off pitches. He was throwing 96, 97, 96, high and away, and I kept fouling him off. But I just knew that if I could give us a spark of any kind, that this team would take off. And so my whole mentality was just try to drive the ball in the gap, Don't try to do too much. I wasn't thinking home run. I was basically trying to get something going, get a run on the board. And, finally on the 8th pitch, 3-2, he threw it down and in, and I got just enough of it to get it out. And, I was praying on the way to first base, Lord, please push this one out.
Get some wind. Some wind in the stadium.
Yeah. I was talking to Gene Autry, too, who's a 26 guy. I'm like, come on, Gene.
Push it out. Yeah, the reference to the legendary Angels owner and cowboy actor, right? Like Gene Autry, who was a longtime Angel owner. So, yeah, I think that for me, Scott, it was just such a mentality, a lesson in mentality. And I know for myself and like a good friend of ours, Coach Kevin Santiago, like we like to show that at bat to young players. And like this is what battling looks like. And there's nothing wrong with fouling a ball with 2 strikes into the dugout, right? like you got to live another day, right? And what that means, because not every pitch is going 40 rows deep in center field. Like you're kidding. Exactly. Like that's not the way the game's played. So yeah. And I think, boy, I mean, what a spark that was for the team in the moment, like to get us back. We ended up, of course, coming back and winning that magical game. And then of course we were down again in game 7 and came back. And so it was, you're right. There was a really special part of that team and about that winners find a way. And I think one of the things that's really special about that team I like to talk about when I speak publicly is that we had so many contributions from so many different players. When you talk about winning teams finding a way, it can come from anywhere, from a great pitching performance. If someone comes in who just gets, in the heart of their lineup, who just stops and gets 5 of 6 strikeouts and we're off the field really quick and back to offense, putting pressure back on them, and those little things that made such a difference, and sacrifice bunts and great defensive plays. And there's so many ways to contribute to a team, right?
Yes. Yeah. The game today is changed a lot. And I don't like that at all, because you don't see those sacrifice bunts. You don't see guys getting over. And I remember Joe Madden talking to us, and he'd be like, listen, and Sosha, they say, listen, don't worry about how many RBIs you have or how many home runs you have or what your average is going to be. If you do the little things, I guarantee all of you will do better. And it was the truth. We had, 5 guys with over 20 home runs and 100 RBIs, a lot of guys between the 50 and 80 RBI. And so it just bred, being a team player, our individual numbers were better. And then the outcome was better. And there's no individual moment, including this game 6 home run, that compares to a team moment, So to be a team player is really the key.
And I loved it. I think that says something about you, Scott, right? When we talk about this, like you don't have the picture in the back of you hitting the home run. You have the picture of the back of the team celebrating the last out, right? Like that was the deal. This is when all the work. I love 2 quotes by Belichick that we're talking about. Like, as you mentioned, legendary Joe Madden, right? And he's a great coach. And Belichick said, one is that he's like, I know we have a good team when everybody on the team knows his job and is doing it. Right? Like, well, I want to hit home runs like Scott does. Well, that's not my job. Like, Trent, like, be quick, get on base. Like, that's not your job to hit home runs. Like, know your role and do it really well, because that's how you contribute inside that organization. And then, of course, you talk about all the sacrifices as a team. And when we talk about these teams, especially, I like to share with people, like, how many cultures came together, races, like backgrounds, experience, how we were raised as kids, all have to come together for this common good. And we share in those different lenses and those values from what we've been through to get there to make us better. And then in the end, man, another Belichick I heard on the interview, like, it's earned, it's never given, right? Like, you got to put in the time. And I think, let's talk about this, because I think it's one of your superpowers, but let's hear what you've got to say. The superpower that separates you from others and catapults you to the 1%. Like, everyone wants to play in the major leagues, right? And you know how hard it is to get there, which is staggering, right? The stats. But we both know how hard it is to stay there, right? Which is the really staggering stat that no one really ever talks about, right?
Absolutely.
So talk about, because you had that long tenured career, talk about what that superpower to you that separated it out.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. It's easy to get there. It's hard to stay, because that's the one thing when I'd go to the old timers games with my dad and sit with Bob Gibson and Lou Brock and guys like that, they'd always say, work hard when you get there, because it's hard to stay. You got all these people from all these countries wanting to take your job, you know?
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
you know, my dad instilled that in me early. And as far as, you know, I'd say the two things that separate me was my work ethic and preparation, both physically and mentally, which led to mental toughness. You know, we'd practice every day in my backyard. I had 2 pitching mounds. My dad would throw to me. I had drills in the basement. I'd take, you know, railroad ties and put them in my trunk when I got older and go to the sand pits and run the sand hills. And then at night I had subliminal mental tapes and positive affirmations playing before I went to bed, which helped me it put me in this visual state where I would visualize myself having success, you know, at my level and even beyond. And I continued to do that. You know, as far as like being in the World Series, I felt like I had already been there a million times because my dad in the backyard would finish every session with, you know, it's 3-2 count, 2 outs, bottom of the 9th, game 7 of the World Series. You know, you're down 1 run, bases loaded. What are you going to do? You know, so I'd been in that situation so many times. When I got to that situation, there was no pressure. I felt comfortable, and I was able to try easier is the term I like to use. You know, a lot of people get revved up and you know, try too hard. In that situation, my whole goal was to slow the game down, and really get into the mental state where I didn't even hear the crowd. The crowd were going crazy. I didn't even hear them. The only time I heard the crowd was when the ball went over the fence and I pumped my fist. That was the one time that I finally heard the crowd. Now, as soon as I got back into the dugout, I had to settle myself down again. And after I gave high fives and everything, if you watch the whole game, I sit down, I close my eyes, and I start doing breathing techniques to slow myself down. Because I knew it was only 5-3, and then my next at bat might be huge.
Yes, for sure.
They ended up intentionally walking me, but you know, I'd say that would be the two things: just the mental and physical preparation. Because you know, Yogi Berra, you know, his quotes. He always says, you know, crazy quotes, but he said, not, you know, the game's 90% mental, the other 50% is physical. Well, of course, his math's a little off, but
I don't know where he gets his math. He was never good at math, Yogi.
Right. But you know, if that's true, then why is it that there's so many kids in athletics and even in business? You know, how many people, you know, can use this in business that don't prepare mentally? You know, my routine, you know, into minor leagues and especially once I got to the major leagues, it probably was an hour to 2 hours every day of mental visualization and replays to get myself better. And that's hard work, you know?
Yeah. So 2 things I think that really come to my mind as you speak is I'm going to add something, because you love the preparation and you were so good at it, right? Like you took pride in that. And I think that was really important. But I love Wooden when he talks about conditioning. He talks about physical conditioning, which you were also good at. You know, you and I worked a lot of that together. Yeah. Mental conditioning also, you did a lot on your own. We did a lot of that together, pushing you to what you could be. But I think you were also doing moral conditioning. You know, as a young man, you know, your parents were very faithful. You were very involved. Like you were not estranged to any kind of spiritual conditioning and like moral, doing the right things, making good choices as a young man. Like, and I can recall like being in baseball chapel together, coming back to that. So, and you know, I think you told me once upon a time, like, hey, listen, you know, when the game's over, like we're on the road, like the first thing I get back to the hotel room is like, I go to the book, man. Like, you know, like that's it, right? Like, so I think there's some moral conditioning, I think, along the way that you were doing to round out that preparation. I thought was really important. Do you see that the same, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that goes in. I mean, that's very interesting because that's doing the right thing and reading is what kept me focused. So, you know, I had a great role model in my parents and my father, you know, very Christian based, you know, just, we'd always have to go to church. I always say I was drugged as a kid, drugged to church, you know, but, I always was a believer. I always had faith. I got stronger as I got to the University of Illinois through Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Yes.
And then baseball chapel as I went through the minor leagues, and I had a really good chaplain in Donnie Moore in Oakland. And then when I got to the Angels with Chuck Obrimsky, we had such a great group of guys,
Yes.
Garrett Anderson, Tim Salmon, the list goes on and on of believers, Benji Molina. We had a big group of guys, and that just gave me this incredible base of support. And, like I wasn't it's crazy because I was a big drinker. I wouldn't even take aspirin,
Yeah.
If I had the little soreness, they'd tell me to take, some kind of anti-inflammatory. I didn't want to take it. So when I get back to the hotels, I started just grabbing the Bible out of the nightstand, and then I started bringing my own. And, I didn't know it at the time, but I was putting on the armor of God at that time,
Yeah.
And I really didn't even realize it, but it was just my way. Instead of going to the bars and hanging out with the guys, I would do that, and then play my guitar a little bit, and after the World Series and I started getting all grabbed from every direction, I started getting away from that, and I wasn't doing as much in 2003. And then 2004, I got hurt, and I don't know if you want me to go into that, but
yeah, I think this is a good time to let's talk about another time you're down, right? You're injured, and we talk a lot about that because injury is really hard for athletes because you've been doing something since you were 8 years old, right, and doing it well, and then all of a sudden at that time you're probably late 20s, and maybe even 30, and you're talking about 20 plus years of a pretty rigorous schedule of this, and probably part of that reason that we succeed is that when you're healthy and you get all the reps, like you got a chance and an opportunity to get seen, like you did that day in that freshman field, right? Like if you're not in the game, like I don't know who you are, right? But you got a chance, maximize that. Well, when you're hurt, you will know that you have no chances right now. And so, you go down and all of a sudden there's some identity loss. There's a confidence game there. There's all sorts of things that's happening. So why don't you speak to that when those losses are kind of mounting for you in that way when you're hurt?
Yeah. So I was really fortunate. I never had any injuries. I had a little meniscus tear, kept me out 4 or 5 weeks, my second year with Oakland, but I came back and finished the season. And so when I got I didn't really want to leave Anaheim because I had such a great base there, and I love the fans and love the stadium and the organization. But they were moving on, and Seattle came to me with a 3-year deal, and it was my first long-term deal. I pretty much played year to year every year, so I was really gung ho to go in there and show them that they made a wise move. And 2 weeks to go in spring training, I freak play coming into the mound from third base. I was trying to catch a pop up, just hit my leg into the side of the mound and blew out my T6 and T7. And I kept trying to play with it, and I just couldn't. So they were telling, I went to a million doctors. They were telling me I might not walk. Then they're saying, well, you're probably not going to play. If you do, you're going to have to wait till July and have a major surgery with a 5% chance of paralyzation. And so I all of a sudden got hit with this depression, and I didn't have that support system yet. I hadn't been around these new guys that much. Right. Family was there every day in spring training, so I didn't lean on anybody else. We had two young boys at the time. And, I just kind of spiraled out of control as far as mentally and my poise in my spiritual life. I was neglecting, reading the word and attending church. And so I just started making bad decision after bad decision, and, when I look back, I wish I would have done things different, but I learned so much from it. And, as I spiraled, I just kept justifying every bad decision, and I just kept going further and further apart. And when I finally looked back, the gap was so big. I just was like, I'm going this way now. And finally, I ended up, coming back on track through surrounding myself with great people, godly people, going back to church, I don't know how far you want me to go into that, but
let's talk about, the losses are real, right? Like you're down, but you're down, but not out. But sometimes people get down and they feel like they're out, like there's just no more hope anymore, right? And I think that as we talked about like that, like you and I were together when your two little boys and even your little girl was born, and and I remember every day, they're hanging around the batting cage with dad. Your oldest was now in that age. He's kind of swinging the wiffle ball bat around and stuff. And people could see here's a father, right? And now, you fast forward, 8 or 10 years and, you have a broken relationship with your former wife. You got estranged children. You're not making good choices. And for people, like what's the one belief, value, or action that you'd recommend others on that journey when things get hard? And it's not easy, right? Like, and if anybody thinks anything you're going to do worth your goals, your big thing, it's going to get hard, like, right? But this is now facing stuff like real stuff, hard life and death stuff.
Yeah.
And what do you recommend? I mean, what do you recommend that we have to do to just stop the losing and begin to turn things around? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, you just got to have that never give up mentality. I remember when I was down and out and I had my kids, and I was, I just seemed like I was failing as a father. And I basically, I started crying, and I asked my kids, I'm like, I had all three of them around me. I'm like, would it just be better if I wasn't involved in your life? Would it be better if I just leave you guys alone? Yeah. And they all,
which by the way, was a legitimate question. There was a lot of pain, right? That was a legit, you were being legitimate. Like, am I helping? Because I just feel like there's a lot of pain around, right?
Absolutely. I didn't know if I was, if they were just not, hating to be around me and, faking it. And I just, I said, would it be easier for you guys? And they all started crying and said, no, we love you. And I'd tear up, but, my oldest son said, it's never too late, Dad. It's never too late. And, it just hit me, and it's like, you know what? It is never too late. And that was the start of me starting to get back on track. And like I said before, it's easy to get buried by all the weight of everything, your addiction, your broken relationships, the guilt of doing everything.
Yes.
And first you have to stop listening to naysayers. Get away from the people that are telling you that you're worthless. Get away from, start reading the word so the devil is not throwing his fiery darts at you and saying you're worthless, you're not worthy of, Jesus' salvation. And so I had to stop listening to that and surrounding myself with better people, reading the word, and just go out and start moving sticks. I live in the middle of the country, and I've got a lot of woods. And so I basically literally went out and started moving sticks and getting them out of the yard so I can mow. And before you know it, it went from me barely getting off the couch, when my kids weren't around, to me being out in the yard and mowing and chainsawing and all sorts of things, making paths in my woods. And eventually I got out of it. And as I started getting out, I got more and more confidence. And then my goal was to put God first, to put my family a close, a second, of course. And nobody takes precedent over God in my life anymore. But family and true friends. I went back to my roots. I'm in my hometown. I was isolating myself. I went back out and searched out my true friends. People from grade school, from high school.
Sure.
I hadn't talked to in years. And it was just amazing how it wasn't that they wanted to be around me because I was a baseball player, Major League, 2-time World Series, whatever. Lead singer of Sand Frog.
Yeah. We should talk about your band. Yeah.
Right. No, we don't. But it was because, they truly cared about me.
Right.
And, they really wanted me to be better. And, my parents, my sisters, my whole family, true friends, Tanya Boyer, who I'm in a relationship with now, a Christian relationship. She was incredible. She stayed by my side. You and Kevin Santiago came down and had Bible study with me. When I was starting to come out of my death cocoon. And that really meant something,
Yeah.
And here I hadn't talked to you, and I hadn't met Kevin, and Kevin told me his story, his testimony, and for you guys to drive down once a week and meet with me just meant something, incredible. And, and then just, it's amazing how God brings things into your life. I ended up, reconnecting with my kids in a way that I hadn't before.
Yes.
Reconnecting with my parents and sisters in a way I hadn't before, with my true friends. And, I
love what you've done as far as making, that statement, Scott Spiezio, it's never too late. You've made that truth from 3 significant sources for me, right? Which is one, we were all on the bench and we might have been lying to each other, but we're like, hey, it's only the 7th. It's never too late. We still got an outlet, right? Like, I don't know if we were so confident, right? But then you proved it like, hey, maybe it really is never too late, right? Because you hit the home run and got us going. And then, you made it true for Tyler, like your one of your sons, like that said, hey, it's never too late, Dad. Like, and you've shown that to him. And then, of course, I think one of the most powerful, right, is our Lord says it's never too late also, right? He says, hey, I'm here. And I think you're living that. And I think that's truly awesome, man. I mean, incredible. Like, it's just incredible, man. I think we got to like wrap there, bro. Like, I mean, I think we got to, I do want to hear like, for we talked about a lot of things, and your dad obviously very influential. I'm glad we got to at least cover a little bit of it. But like, as you talk about this, what do you think? Like, if you had one thing to tell somebody, they want to be great. They want to be elite. They're on the path. They're working hard, and we run into setbacks. Like, is there something that you'd like to tell them that we haven't covered today, that some things they have to consider, like, hey, this isn't unforeseen, like it's going to happen. Right. And I think I love that you said, I think one of the things that most people don't recognize, I love this when you said that, hey, that at bat in Game 6, like I'd had that bat, 2,500 times in my life mentally. Right. Like, right. And people don't think like, I like to tell people like, yeah, I was a coach. I was like what I call a dream maker, because I help these guys all live their dreams. Because, 15 years ago, we were all running around our backyard going bottom of the 9th, 2 outs with our wiffle bat, right. And we were putting ourselves in that situation. And now, like, you're actually in the middle of it, right? Like you're actually, and you hear people going, hey, how you doing, man? Living the dream. No, these people are actually living the dream, like happening right now.
Right.
So tell me about what you might tell them. Maybe one, a nugget or two that you think a takeaway.
Just things off the top of my head as far as like how to come back from setbacks.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think I covered a bunch of that as far as just that never give up attitude.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like trying to get to your dreams, the biggest thing for me was, I had dreams, so I had to set goals. So, and
did you write those down? Did you write them down?
So I did. So and I didn't know what I was doing. I know Denzel Washington always says, dreams without goals are just that, dreams, and they often lead to heartbreak, right?
Yeah.
And in order to achieve those goals, you have to have discipline and consistency, right? And so what I used to do as a kid is every year going in before baseball season, like as soon as baseball season ended, because we're here and we got winter, I would set goals for the next year. I'd write them on a piece of paper and tape them to my headboard, right? And so each year I'd have a little thing right above my head on my headboard that had the goals for the following season. So I knew exactly, once I had those goals, I knew what I had to do to achieve them. And there was many times I didn't want to go in the basement and hit off balance beam, for my balance, or take ground balls off the wall to increase my hands being soft, shovel the driveway to throw ground balls off of the garage door, get up when it was 30 degrees outside to hit, all those things, so set goals is a huge thing. And then another big thing is be prepared when your opportunity comes, you know? So my dad, he didn't have a major league father teaching him. He had his dad was an incredible athlete, probably the best out of all of us by far, actually. But he worked with my dad. When he got up to the major leagues, he was, there's only 16 teams in the league in 1964. He comes up from Lewis University in 63. In 1964, he's at the World Series playing the Yankees, and the Cardinals all-star lineup, Ken Boyer, which was my dad's position, played third, and he was the MVP of the National League. So, and then you go around the whole field and it was all stars everywhere, Kurt Flood, Lou Brock, Mike Shannon, Orlando Cepeda, you name it.
Yeah.
And, so what my dad did, and my dad was a right-hander. What my dad did is said, you're going to learn every position. So when we go out to the high school or whatever field we could find, it didn't matter. Sometimes it was a parking lot, or a cow pasture. I would play every single position. Sometimes my mom would be at second. I'd be flipping her flips from second base or shortstop, so I'd go to the outfield and throw from every position, take fly balls. So that way, if my opportunity came, I'd be ready to make a change. Let's say there's an MVP in front of me and they're not moving. They just signed him to a $50 million contract, So he made me a switch hitter. And he made me learn every position. And thank God, because I came up as a third baseman. I get to Oakland, and it's 2 weeks to go in spring training. Art Howe comes, goes, "Hey, you ever play second base?" I said, "Oh yeah, I played it all the time. I practiced it all the time, but as far as playing,
never actually had any games. But I practiced it all the time."
Yeah. I think I had 2 games in American Legion ball when I was like 15 years old. But I told him, and so you know what? That day he said, "Go play a B game at second." I did well, and he released Brent Gates, who was our starting second baseman, and I became the starting second baseman for the next 2.5 years in Oakland.
Yeah.
But I was ready. I was ready,
prepared. Yeah, and you played every position in the major leagues except one, right?
Well, center field and catcher, I think.
Okay, you never caught. Okay, all right. I knew you didn't play center field. I've seen you run. So, I knew that, but I didn't know the catch. I thought you got in there and threw the gear on one time. So that's pretty. Well, by the way, folks, that is including he pitched, right? That doesn't.
I have the best ERA in the history of the game. I pitched.
That's right. Lowest.
Yeah. The lowest. Sorry, the lowest ERA in the history of the game was 0. I pitched 1 inning. I got up to 87 though, and I had that's some cheddar, man. That's no BP fastball. Yeah. So I got a quick story about the catching if we got time. I don't know.
Yeah, let's do a quick one.
All right. So I was in Seattle, and I'm not playing my second year there. I'd only got 40 at bats or something, just having a horrible year.
Yep.
This is the start of my the start of my downhill decline. And so Mike Hargrove goes, "Hey, Spiez, in order to get you some more bats, Dan Wilson just got hurt. Why don't you go ask him to teach you how to catch?" So I go in there and I go, "Dan, hey, Mike wants you to teach me how to catch." He goes, "Okay, squat down." So I squat down. He goes, "Can you get lower than that?" I go, "How's that?" He goes, "Okay, that's as far as you can get." He goes, "Okay, stand up." So I stand up and he goes, "Now turn around." So I turn around and he goes, "Now walk out there and tell him you can't catch." He goes, "That's an impossible feat with your flexibility."
Thanks, Dan, for all your help. I appreciate his recognition that you had no chance. All right. Well, listen, let's wrap this. I want to take some Q&A here, but before we do, follow the show on YouTube Live. Many more videos on Leadershipity's channel on YouTube and Instagram, Twitter at Trent M. Clark. We are on Instagram at Leadershipity, of course. My handles are Trent M. Clark and Leadershipity on all of them. For you, why don't you remind them, Scott, real quick on where they can find you again?
So I'm on Facebook. I got to look.
Yeah, good. Yeah, check it all out, man. Yeah, I got to go to the digits, right?
Facebook page, Scott Spiezio. It's never too late. I'm on Twitter at Scott_Spiezio. LinkedIn on Scott Spiezio. Instagram at Spiezio S. So those are places you can get me.
Yeah. Scott's available for hire. He does speaking engagements, corporate events. So yeah, probably reach out. Does it still hitting lessons and stuff like?
Yeah.
Wow. Can you imagine someone getting hitting from a 2-time World Series champion? That's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah. I am starting. I actually already have the LLC for Spiezio Baseball. I have a facility in Morris here, and I've been doing private lessons. So there's going to be a Facebook page started called Spiezio Baseball soon, and I'll be sending invites for those people around Morris, Illinois. So,
nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. If you enjoyed today's episode, please continue listening and rate Winners Find a Way. 5 stars, please. We work hard to find value-delivering stories and 1% leaders and folks in the world that can deliver on every episode some things for us. And I'm going to end today with Scott. Give us your best verse. Give us your best verse that you have.
I brought a book. It's Stepping Up to Manhood, which I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there you go. Put it in front of you and we can see it.
All right, there. Oh, there you go. Sorry. So So I started getting into life groups at my church, and now I actually lead. I did Not a Fan, and
nice, great book.
We're doing letters to the church, and also men's group. It's at the Village Christian Church in Manuka on Tuesday nights. There's a men's group, and I have mine on Monday nights. But the Stepping Up Call to Courageous Manhood was just an incredible series for me.
That's by Dennis Rainey, right?
Yeah, it was amazing, and it was like God put the people. Charlie Pierce, who was leading my rooted group, asked me to join, and I'm thinking, oh, this is another thing, and now I don't ever want to miss it on Tuesday nights, and I'm trying to bring as many people from the area that I know to it. But I have a couple quotes. So one, or scriptures, John 16:33. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world. Now, if that doesn't take pressure off, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I like that, right? I find like pressure to be self-applied, right? And so with that, like, are we applying that pressure on? Because that's not how the world works, right? That's not how under his tutelage it works. I'll drop mine in, and then I'll give you another one to finish up.
All right, yeah.
My quote today is James 1:22, right? I always love that. Yeah. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. And for me, that was very important for you, Scott. I admire about you. We grow up listening to the word, and like you say, being dragged to church, and we listen to teachers, but are we deceiving ourselves that we're not getting the information? Are we deceiving ourselves that we think we know when we don't know? When we actually put that and execute that word into it. And I think when I look at you and your turnaround and how you found a way to win, I just admire the way that you've taken action, right? Like you said, hey, I will do what it says. And you've done that. And I love that about you, man. I think it's very admirable. So.
Well, I learned that for some great people like yourself, Kevin, Charlie, Nate, Nick, everybody at the church, and my dad. Service is a huge part of being a Christian and bringing other people to have a personal relationship with Jesus. That's my goal now. I love baseball and I love everything, but that's the one thing you can't do in heaven, and that's what Albert Pujols gave me a book in 2007 when I was struggling. He said, "What's wrong?" And he gave me a book, and it was the one thing you can't do in heaven, and that's bring people to a personal relationship with Jesus, and that's what it's all about for me.
That's cool. That's awesome. Let's wrap right there. Let's go to some quick Q&A here.
Sure.
And thank you for everyone joining us. If you have any questions, I may be able to get it in if you get it in the chat quickly. But my first question is how did you get developed by like other coaches and other leaders? Like what were some of the influencers? I mean, we talked about your dad, but you had a lot of them, like coaches, Illinois, a bunch of other things. What were some of those big development moments for you that you really gleaned from some of the top coaching that you had?
Well, I mean, as far as physically, Ron Washington was unbelievable at teaching me how to play second base and become a better infielder. His work ethic was unbelievable. I had 2 weeks to basically learn second base. I had, practiced it, but not at the major league level or any level as far as game speed. So we were out there at 7:00 every morning, so much so turning double plays that my hands swelled up. And I had to actually take a day off because it was just so swollen from working so hard. But I ended up that year only making 7 errors. I was second in total chances and second in double plays turned, and I had missed 15 days with I got hit by Henkin in my hand. But as far as physical, he was probably the best one. Joe Madden was great. Never giving, never letting down. I remember his phrase, jug runs. That was, say we're winning 2-1 going into the bottom of the 8th or something at home. He'd say, let's get jug runs. Let's make sure that we're going for the jugular. And that was huge for us in 2002 and 2000.
Yeah. He really taught young players how to win. Right. Absolutely. Like you can't let off the gas, right? Like, and there's a way to win. And, and when you talk about that 02 team, no playoff experience, like that became very important to teach because you were literally learning how to win on the fly, right? Like, it's not like you had people who are like, hey, this is the time where we got to absolutely, because I've been here 13 times, right? Yeah. We didn't have anybody. So that was, that's awesome.
Tony La Russa was great too because I wasn't playing every day there. I mean, I did play quite a bit. I think I had, close to 300 at bats in 2006, which was an incredible year. That was a resurgent year after having the injury, not playing in 2005, getting released in August, not thinking I'd ever play in the major leagues again or get a chance. And, he gave me a chance. They gave me number 26. I thought I'd be like 99, as a minor.
Right. That's the spring training number, 99 right there, right? You're not making the club when you get 99.
Exactly. So I got 26, and right then I knew we were going to win it. And I told people that as early as spring training. And but he was really good at explaining to me why he made the moves he did. So I got to kind of get inner workings of the decision making as a manager, which was really, really neat.
Yeah, I think that's why catchers are so successful, right? Yeah. As that leadership role, because they always are tied up with the managers and having those conversations of what of our strategy. I got to quarterback the game, right? And that becomes so important. And I appreciate that you brought up that '06 as you beat up on my Tigers, that year. And as our paths cross again, right? Yeah. Our paths cross again when I'm sitting in the stands, right? Because I had tickets to the World Series in '06. I was out of baseball at the time. And I had bought tickets for my father, who was a longtime Tiger fan. So I had taken my dad, and a great memory for my dad and I to be at even the playoff run. The Tigers had a great run that year, and they just ran up against a buzzsaw with you guys. But it was a fabulous year for Detroit. It was a really nice time of a reawakening for a city too, who needed that, a championship run, needed that unity around the city. And it was and it's amazing what sports does in that way, right? It just drives us into that. So let's talk about let's talk about learning from mistakes. That's the next question I have. How do you learn from your mistakes? Like, I always hear people go, "Oh, man, I made a mistake. It's so bad," and I'm like, "Oh no, I love it!" Like, because I remember when I was a pretty competitive tennis player too, right? So. When I beat people, I was like, hey, on to the next match. When I lost, man, it was 2 weeks of working out, watching the video, going back to all the clips. Like, I didn't want to make those mistakes ever again, right? So all the learnings all of a sudden turned into all the mistakes. So tell me about what you can give people, because mistakes are part of the deal, right?
Yeah. So I mean, in baseball, if you're a great hitter, you're failing 70% of the time.
Yeah. That's worth $10 million now.
You can hit 200 now, strike out 200 times if you hit 40 home runs. I wish I would on that, But, overcoming failure is huge, but learning from your mistakes is huge too. When you see these billionaires, a lot of them have failed multiple times, went bankrupt, and in any part of life, learning from failure, me going through what I went through, I've learned so much more, empathy, more love. I wouldn't be the person today if I didn't fail miserably in a lot of ways, especially, with addiction and as a father, so now I've learned from those mistakes, and I'm doing everything I can to correct those mistakes. When you're at the bottom, you see what's important in your priorities.
Yeah.
And as far as baseball, there's many times where I might get strike out on a backdoor slider or something, and so the next time up, I make the adjustment. I learn from what pitches are doing to me. And the next time up, hey, you try doing that again, I'm hitting the ball down the left field line. Little things like that. You always put them in the back of your mind, and then you process them after the game. You don't really want to replay failures during the game or mistakes. But after the game is the time. That's why the mental game is so important. You go through, you can visualize that, go back, erase it, and replay it the way you want to, and that's what I did. I'd have clear keys during the game where I'd wipe my bat off or wipe the ground, and that would get rid of all negative thoughts for any mistake I made, whether it be an error or swinging at a bad pitch, and I'd go right back into my focus. But then after the game on the drive home, and when I was sitting, I'd go through those mistakes, learn from them, and replay them the way I wanted to. And then I'd reinforce with successful times, successful at bats, successful plays. I'd replay those over and over with mini highlight reel for myself in order to reinforce those positive, outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's where people don't recognize that value of. I tell a lot of people, like, hey, at the major leagues, like, everyone knows what they do really well. And they're like, I'm going to keep doing this until you can stop me. Right. Yeah. Like, I'm very confident that I'm better than you at this. Right. And there's value in that, and that reinforcement of so much positive, because in a game, like you said, that does have a lot of negative, right? We better know who we are. There is a lot of self-awareness and poise that is required at that top level. And I love that. I love that mistakes, right? That so we learn what they are. Right. And then we study how to adapt. and then we execute, the adaptability required to turn that into another direction, right? And sometimes that's trial and error, right? We have to try, like, hey, I'm going to do that backdoor slider. I'm going to move up 2 inches on the plate because I'm fearful of it. And then he saws your bat off and you go, oh, that didn't work out great. I can't go that far because I can't catch up, right? So I can only move in 1 inch and I can still get to it and I can still get to that inside pitch, right? And so we have those things that we have to adapt to. And it's a trial and error process. And I think it's and I love the fact that you mentioned there are so many successful people in this world. Who you think, like Lincoln, right? Your home state, Abraham Lincoln, like the guy, he's an epitome of failure right along the way. And if people just look at the fact, like the trials and tribulations that he faced, yet everyone knows him as a great man and as a great leader and all the things he contributed later. But there was error along the way. It was challenge along the way. So none of us are immune to that, right?
Yeah, you got me thinking about the Yankees with that backdoor slider or cutter like Mariano, and I had no problem with them. But in game 1, looking back, and I always say this, if you make a mistake, as long as you still have an out, a strike, you always have a chance to rewrite history, right? Yeah. I would say if you still got a pen, you can write the ending however you want it. That's can make a great ending. And I use it. So when we played the Yankees in game 1, I made a play on Jason Giambi ball that I usually make. A line drive, it hit off top of my glove, went into right field. They ended up hitting a home run after that. Soriano hit a home run. And we ended up losing the game. Now, they didn't give me an error, and it wasn't. But usually I make that play. When I got back to the hotel, I had to do not disturb on my phone and an alias. But somehow they got my number, and I picked up the phone and listened to the messages. And it was this guy just ranting and raving about how horrible I was and how we're going to lose now. And you got no chance against these guys. You blew it. And I just sat down and I'm like, man, he's right. And then I said, you know what? He's not right. We still got a game tomorrow. So my whole thing was, if you still got a pen. And so I went up, my first at bat was off Pettit and I hit a home run. And I used that throughout my life, and with my addiction, I could have had a horrible ending. I could have been a tragic ending, but I kept saying, I still got a pen. I still can write this. And I tell a lot of people, I'm going to write a book. And now, but I said, I'm waiting for the happy ending. So instead of waiting for it, I started doing it, and we're still writing. So
we're still writing.
It's a much better ending than it could have been.
Yeah. This is the journey, right? Well, I'm so glad, that you could join us today. Scott Spiezio, famous 2-time World Series champion. Man, it's exciting. Good friend of mine. And so I'm excited that we got to share this time together, Scott, for everyone out there. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate your good questions. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize. A lot of good stories from Scott, a lot of good information that we take away from that, right? And I'll just tell you, I think Scott Spiezio, it's never too late, right? You have to, if there's one thing I learned today, like, hey, you got to keep pressing, you got to keep moving. There's failures in this lifetime, and we win or we learn, right? And some of those mistakes, we're going to come back and we're going to learn and we're going to get better and get back up and do it again. And it's never too late. There's still that pen, man. Rewrite that ending. So thankful, Scott. Thank you. So blessed to have you with us today, my man.
Oh, it was such a pleasure, man. Love you, brother, and looking forward to getting together soon, man. Thanks so much for having me on. It was a great discussion.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for joining us for another Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. If you love this episode, share this episode with your friends and follow us on whatever podcasting medium you're listening to. If you want more content from us, join us at leadershipity.com or the Leadershipity YouTube channel. You can find us on all the social media networks at either Trent M. Clark or Leadershipity. For our award-winning workshop, Win with Great Teams, you can find that page on LinkedIn as well as our corporate page, Leadershipity. If you want to win more it starts with you today. Say it with me now. I have what it takes.